This is the Battle of Olustee State Historic Park. It's located in near the town of Olustee today. There was the largest Civil War battle in Florida was fought here. It was when Brigadier General Truman A. Seymour marched west with 5,500 Union troops from Jacksonville, and his mission was to capture the capital of Florida, Tallahassee, which was in Confederate hands. However, the Confederates mounted a defense, and that was led by Brigadier General Joseph Finnegan, and he assembled an army which was reinforced by Brigadier General Alfred H. Colquitt, who brought reinforcements from Charleston. They planned a defense on a narrow passageway between Ocean Pond and a swamp near what was then Olustee Station, and a battle was fought. And we're going to view the battlefield and the monuments. So come join us. And this is the Olustee Monument. It was built in 1912 to commemorate the battle. It has a plaque on it. And it commemorates that the battle was fought on February 20th, 1864, and it talks about 2,000 lives were lost by the Union and almost 1,000 by the Confederates. And it was one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, actually. And as you can see, the two artillery pieces perched here by the Visitor Center and the Olustee Monument. And this monument is dedicated to Brigadier General Joseph Finnegan, and he commanded the district of Middle and East Florida during the Civil War. And he did a good job defending it from the Union, and it memorializes his victory here over the Union in the Battle of Olustee. This monument commemorates Brigadier General Alfred H. Colquitt, who was the second Confederate commander at the battle. In the North, they call it the Battle of Ocean Pond because they usually name battles after bodies of water, rivers, lakes. And the Confederates usually name battles after cities. So it's known as the Battle of Olustee in Florida. And they call Colquitt the hero of Olustee. His decisive engagement prevented a Sherman-like invasion of Georgia from the south. So this monument was created in 1936. And we're going to take a look at the museum and see the artifacts and displays they have here.
General Seymour's words.
Here's a Confederate battle flag inside the museum.
Have met the enemy at Olustee and now falling.
And some buttons and bullets that were retrieved from the battle site. And an example of how a soldier would be dressed in the battle. This is a panorama miniature of the battlefield. Confederate soldiers defending against Union soldiers. And some artifacts from that period in the mid-19th century. Some currency and a sewing kit. And a cup. Looks like some hardtack. Not very tasty food. And some pictures to remember the family by. And we are going to take a tour of the battlefield lines and view the sequence of the battle. And right here shows the trail. And it shows on the right where the Union forces were positioned on that side, and then on the left where the Confederate forces were positioned on that side. And it's an interpreted trail. You can see the layout of the battlefield. Lots of saw palmetto and a lot of pine trees, longleaf pines. This talks about how the Union Army left Barber's Plantation at 6 a.m. and they expected to meet the Confederates in Lake City, which was 32 miles away, and which would give them the opportunity to cut off the railroad communications in east and west Florida, which would be a major strategic advantage. But it didn't work out that way, and by early afternoon the Union cavalry they drove the Confederates west for several miles, which was a ploy, since the Confederates were waiting for them at Olustee Station. And this is the point where the battle began. And just a view across the battlefield from the Union perspective. Okay, so when the two armies met and they committed to the fight, the Union troops were positioned between two swamps. One that stopped their advance forward, and the other which blocked their retreat. Not a very strategic place to be in. No place really to hide. It was kind of an openish field. Some pines, some pine flatwoods. But neither side really knew much about the enemy, because the Union Army had just landed in Jacksonville weeks previously. And it included the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, which was an all-black unit. And the fighting would become fierce. On top of all that, I'm sure that the mosquitoes were horrendous. Not in February so much, but here in July, I can attest that the mosquitoes are furious on this battlefield. As you can see, the battlefield can be thick with scrub, palmetto, saw palmetto scrub, and pine. So around 2 p.m., the battle began to intensify as the Union troops reached a railroad crossing east of Olustee Station. And they faced increased resistance as more Confederate troops rolled into the battle. The 7th Connecticut Regiment opened up with heavy fire from their Spencer repeating rifles, and they caught the 64th Georgia off guard, killing all of their regiment's field officers. So General Colquitt, when his reinforcements arrived, just in time to stop the Confederate advance, and they kept the 64th Georgia from being cut down completely. The 7th Connecticut advanced further than their flanks, which exposed them, and they soon found themselves in a crossfire of Confederates from 3 sides. And finally their ammunition ran low, and they had to withdraw several hundred yards to the rear. And this is where the this is where the Union advance was finally halted, and there was the turn of the tide. And this is the scene of the fighting at 2 p.m. where the Union was forced to halt their advance and fall back. So by 3 p.m., the 7th New Hampshire Regiment of the Union Army deployed on the Union right, on the right flank, and they received heavy fire from the Confederates. And Colonel Hawley, who led the 7th New Hampshire, either gave the wrong command or his command was misunderstood, because it resulted in mass confusion for the entire 7th New Hampshire Regiment to scatter and drift to the rear. The Union line just broke. The 8th U.S. Colored Troops, with no battle experience and little training, were deployed on the Union left flank, where the New Hampshire had abandoned. They had less than 1 month service, very raw troops, had never practiced firing even their weapons. they were severely mauled in a railroad crossing east of Olustee. And 310 were killed or wounded. Very, very heavy casualties. So Colonel Barton's brigade had filled in where the 7th New Hampshire had fled. But at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, General Colquitt sent in Colonel Harrison, who had arrived to reinforce the Confederates. And they drew into this area of the field where it was a continuous raging battle with canister shot on both sides. The 115th New York Regiment swept forward into the face of galling fire, and just suffered very heavy casualties. Later in the afternoon, after 4 o'clock, the Union had 5 cannons that were captured at this location, and nearly every other cannon in the Union arsenal was rendered useless. The artillerymen and the horses that carried them, nearly all killed or wounded. It was considered the greatest slaughter among artillery known in the history of this war, according to someone in the 115th New York Regiment. At this point, the Confederates also mounted a large cannon on a railroad flat car and fired a large shot every 5 minutes, which decimated the Union troops. So about at this point, the Union were pretty much through. So shortly before 5 p.m., the 1st North Carolina U.S. Colored and the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiments, they stopped the Confederates momentarily, but both sides were low on ammunition, but the Confederates were able to recover ammunition first. And they just launched a new offensive which drove the entire Union lines back. The Confederate advance was led by the 27th Georgia Regiment, and all the Union forces were just driven from their positions furiously. And a view of the where the action was taking place. Thousands wounded, hundreds killed on this battlefield. And the North got beat pretty bad here. And at this point, after 3 hours of fighting, excepting the 115th New York Regiment, which had been compelled to leave the field, the Union just was taken off and retreat at this point. And just taking as many of the wounded as I could with them. And the Confederates ruled the day. And so at this point, Brigadier General Colquitt's brigade gradually advanced until they were nearly on the Union left flank. The Union broke and fled, and the battle ended right here. Confederates followed for a few miles in some cases, but they basically let the Union retreat all the way back to Jacksonville. The Union suffered 1,861 killed, wounded, and missing. And the Confederates, 946 casualties. And that concludes our trip to Olustee Battlefield State Historic Site on this hallowed ground. If you enjoyed this journey with us, please click like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you on our next adventure.